I remember going through the gate to drop our oldest off at daycare on base before heading to the NICU. And, when you drive through the gate, you show them your military ID, they scan it and hand it back to you. And it is a completely normal thing to say, have a good day. And I remember, it broke me. I mean, I was in, such a dark space because how dare someone just flippantly tell me to have a good day? This is not a good day. This is not a good, life. That, isn't there anything I can do to erase this experience, to, press rewind, to undo whatever happened?
I saw it at the hand washing station at the entrance of the NICU. I see it in the playroom during medical play bingo. I see it near the fish tank in the surgery waiting room. There is a powerful unspoken language between two parents who have never met, but know in their deepest soul what the inside of a children's hospital feels like. It is joy and it is grief. It is love and it is fear. It is miracles and it is loss. This podcast exists to tell these stories. I'm Katie Taylor, a very proud child life specialist, and it is my honor to be your host of Inside the Children's Hospital. Hello, my friends. I'm so happy to be with you today. My name is Katie Taylor. I am a certified child life specialist. Today, I have the opportunity to speak with Marah. Just 9 days after her twins were born, her daughter suffered a cardiac arrest in the home. What happened after that, the details are blurry for Marah. We talk about it all, from those first shocking, horrible moments to getting to the hospital, to spending time in the NICU, bringing her daughter home, having a child with disabilities, and now being a full-blown medical mom advocate. Her journey has not been linear. It's been full of ups and downs. She's also the managing editor for a political science journal. She's an incredibly impressive woman, but what's most amazing about her is her ability to share what their experience has been like so vulnerably so that other families feel less alone. Let's get started. Well, Marah, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners? Tell us a little bit about you, where you live, your family, and what brings you to us today.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really delighted to be here. So I am Marah. I have 4 daughters, and we live on an acreage in Iowa. And I have an 8-year-old daughter, and I have 4-year-old twins, and I have a 2-year-old daughter. And one of our 4-year-old twins, Abigail, had a cardiac arrest incident at 9 days old, and threw us headfirst into medical parenthood and into a life that I was, in a sense, blissfully ignorant of, in another sense, wholly prepared for. And navigating, what that looked like along, NICU stay with, the placement of a trach and a G-tube and all the diagnoses that came, moving across the country to be closer to a family support system. Just the ups and downs of navigating that with my husband, and knowing that at the time when we started out, I didn't know of any resources, and I definitely felt very alone and very afraid, very vulnerable, being worried that the same thing would happen to the other twin. And I think now I can recognize in myself, and I think in part because some dear friends of mine have pointed it out to me, that I've clearly transitioned into the next part of this medical motherhood journey, which is that, I can embrace it and I can own it and I can be joyful within it. And I want to be in a space of, advocacy and, being a part of this community that informs each other and helps each other, and certainly is there for those who are starting out on these journeys and feel so heartbroken and devastated and afraid.
I love how you put this 2-part journey, because when someone has, let's picture Marah years ago, who was going through this at the beginning, It can be so probably even more isolating to see like other people in the community embracing it and talking about joy. And you're like, what are you even talking about? How do you even move to that space from the depths and the sorrow that I'm in now?
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it. That's exactly right. Every journey, of course, is so unique. And, you know, mine, which I share with some others, is, I was experiencing a healthy identical twin pregnancy and I was envisioning what that would look like. And I was, imagining having, three healthy little girls instead of one healthy little girl. And I was looking forward to breastfeeding and I was looking forward to, a year home with them. And um, when all of that is ripped away and, you still exist in this world and you still see, all of the things continuing on as they do. So my husband's an active duty Air Force, and I remember that, obviously after, right after the cardiac arrest incident, it was very, very critical. So it was unclear whether Abigail would survive at all. And I remember going through the gate to drop our oldest off at daycare on base before heading to the NICU. And, when you drive through the gate, you show them your military ID, they scan it and hand it back to you. And it is a completely normal thing to say, have a good day. And I remember like it broke me. I mean, I was in like such a dark space because how dare someone just flippantly tell me to have a good day? Like, this
Yeah.
is not a good day. This is not a good like life that like isn't there anything I can do to erase this experience, to like press rewind, to undo whatever happened? And yeah, so I mean that's a really raw, really painful place to be. And now I know that I'm not the only one who has experienced that.
Yeah. And thank you for mentioning both what you and your husband do for our country and for your service. And it adds a whole other element to probably getting access to care and support and where you live and so many other things. So I'm very interested in that part of your story too. And we don't have
Sure.
to touch on the kind of the details of that day, Mara, because I can imagine it was incredibly difficult to relive. And you've done so much work since then to process, but kind of take everybody back to what you were experiencing and what happened and how you ended up going to the NICU to see your daughter there.
Yeah, so like I said, the twins were born. They spent a little bit of time in the NICU. We discharged home, and we had some really blissful days together. And we had family photos taken, which for a long time was again too painful for me to revisit because that was
Yeah.
from a time before everything changed. And then Abigail was. Had the cardiac arrest incident, and thankfully, my husband had spent the last several years teaching CPR. I cannot underscore enough how important it is that parents know CPR. And even though I had been certified many times as a lifeguard through all of my teen years, I completely froze. There's nothing that could have prepared me for that. And thankfully, he was, um, you know, did what had to be done, as traumatic as it was, and
And that he
paramedics
was
took over
home.
from there. That he was home. Exactly. He had just come back from a run. So it was, I mean, we lived right around the corner from the fire department. They came immediately and we followed them to the ER, of course, fearful of the very worst. And then when we got to the ER, I'll never forget, someone was trying to direct us like nonchalantly where to park. And again, like I hadn't nothing was going to be between me and my baby. Like, just get me to my baby. And when we went inside, the person at the desk said, "Oh, one moment, the chaplain is coming to greet them." And ironically enough, my dad has been a police chaplain for decades, and I know it's not a good sign when the chaplain is coming to meet you. And so I was, hysterical in the face of the chaplain coming to meet us, and ended up just being to take us to where they were working on her, where it was pronounced that they had a heartbeat. And now, knowing what I know now, I know that that is bare minimum and I know what that can mean. But that day, I had no idea what that meant. I had no idea what might be ahead or what might not be ahead. And gosh, did we learn quickly.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think about logistics really quick because you have your other 9-day-old daughter, and then your other one was at daycare. So you dropped one off at daycare, and then you had the other one with you?
No, so this was actually this was on October 17th of 21. This was a Sunday morning, and
Okay.
my mom was still in town because she was going to stay in town 2 weeks postpartum to help out.
Yeah.
And my oldest was home and unfortunately witnessed all of that unfold. And then the 9-day old was. I left the 9-day old and the 4-year old at the time with my mom.
Okay.
So we were able
Okay.
to just immediately leave.
Just
But
go.
again, there was a lot of like in no other world would I even leave my 9-day olds. Like,
Right,
but I
right, right.
just,
Like you're barely going to the bathroom without them.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and then what you brought up about the chaplain is so important. And I feel for so many chaplains who go into so many different hospital rooms, and people are like, oh no, why are you here? What does this mean? I'm not religious. And I think, like, let's just put it on the record. Chaplains are there to support patients and families in the hospital through every single part of the process. And sometimes they're the person that gets called to help walk you to your room, or they're the person who helps get called to make sure you have lunch that day. And that not every time they come do they have the bearer of bad news, but it is that, like, that gasping moment of, oh my God, what does this mean?
yeah, yeah. You're exactly right.
Can you walk us through that kind of that initial experience back in the hospital? Did they bring her back to the NICU? Did they put her in the PICU, or where did they put her within the children's hospital?
So thankfully, it's not a children's hospital actually. So
Okay.
she was at Tampa General Hospital because it was the closest to us and it was where they were born.
Okay.
But they did agree miraculously. It's not standard practice, but they did agree to allow her to go back to the NICU
Yeah.
because that is where she had been discharged from. And um, I'm so thankful, and I was so thankful each and every single day that that is where we got to go back to. So we transferred up to the NICU, and the transport team was working on her, and a lot I don't remember from that day, but I remember someone complimenting me on how what wonderful care I took of her. Umbilical cord site because they were able to go through that umbilical cord
Wow.
stump to be able to provide life-saving aid if necessary. They didn't need to, but they had the access. I remember everything was a blur. I remember us, um, a lot of crying, a lot of fear. But I also remember, you know, immediate just awareness, what reading the faces, reading the room, reading the tone. And one of the transport nurses, his name was Rick, and I'll never forget him because he came out and everyone had been talking about how she had just had a seizure. And he came out and he said, listen, I know this isn't saying much, but a seizure right now is a really good sign. It takes a lot of energy to muster up a seizure for the brain. And then he paused and he said, and I need you to know there's a lot I could be doing for your daughter that I am not doing. There is a lot more that I could be doing. So even though she was intubated, she was on an oscillating ventilator, all I knew is my baby is on life support, and that is a horrible, horrible, feeling. But hearing from him, there are lots of meds and drips and things that I could be using that I'm not using, that was what I needed to get through day one and what my husband needed to get through day one.
It was like planting a seed of hope where you had not even seen any possibility of a glimmer for some.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
makes me want to, like, scream at healthcare professionals to say the thing, say the thing like, you're taking such great care of the umbilical cord. I could be doing so much more. I think sometimes in an effort to deliver the most accurate and factual information, it sometimes feels like healthcare professionals have to deliver it in a very dark light. But that one piece of hope is sometimes what, exactly like you said, gets you through the day. Oh, thank you, Rick, if you're listening.
I know. Thank you, Rick. And I think too, the other thing that was um, so important was that immediately the nurses who were there were nurses who, on the floor were nurses who we knew from, the few days postpartum. So immediately we just felt really enveloped by really deep love and support and care. And the attending who was on, Dr. Randis, she was also incredible. I feel very fortunate that she was the one who was on at the very beginning of that period of time because most of her time she spends doing research. So she's not on the floor in the NICU very often. But I recognize how crucial it was to have the right attending at the right time. And she was very, everyone, a few things I will say. So everyone was very, there was no decision to be made, and everyone made that very clear. Like that day, we were not in a position, like there was no decision to be made. And, she made it really clear that, this was a Sunday and we had several days that were very, very critical. And that, by Wednesday, like Wednesday is a big day because, between now and Wednesday, these are the different scenarios that could unfold. The body could shut down and not be able to handle what has happened. The body could kind of bounce back, blah, blah, blah. And then obviously the brain is another important part of this whole thing, right? And the initial MRI looked terrible, so we were all very, very afraid of what would happen because we had been very prepared for, injury could take a little bit of time to set in, and just to be prepared for anything. And at the same time, we made it very clear that we wanted to do absolutely anything and everything to support Abigail, without, pulling her along. Like she needed to be leading the way, and we would follow her no matter what it took. And everyone was so on board with that. And even though there were times, we had to advocate, like my husband, it was really important for him at the time that we didn't continue down the rabbit hole of hypotheticals every day. Like we didn't need to know what could happen or what might happen, but rather, how is Abigail doing? What are we seeing? What are we not seeing? And kind of remaining really in the present in order for us to be able to really survive that time period. And making that really clear to everyone was really important. And I will say, like one more point that I think is important is my mom, who was visiting. She, of course, was ready to do anything to support us during this time. And she's an administrator at a rehab hospital. And so she understands hospital policy and she understands, how the healthcare system works. And it was really helpful. So, it was still the time period of COVID policies, so there were a lot of restrictions. And I remember Dr. Randis, the attending, coming to me that day and saying, Marah, what do you need? What can I do to advocate for you in terms of what your family needs? And I looked at her and I said, I need the parents only rule to completely be thrown out the window for the duration of Abigail's stay. I need my mom to be allowed to spend every single night here with her. I need to feel like I can go home to be with Eleanor and Josephine and keep some semblance of normal for our 4-year-old, and know that Abigail has someone bedside, that Abigail has someone singing to her and kissing her and stroking her and massaging her and touching her and holding her. Like, I need you to change the policy. Like, I know that it's possible, and that's what I need from you. And she looked at me and she said, I'm officially taking it off of your plate, and I'm going to go get that exception made. And whatever she did worked. I know it took a lot of advocating and a lot of there was pushback because those were the rules. But by training, I'm a political scientist. I'm a researcher, and I know that, exceptions can usually be made to rules. And so that was a really important lesson in a provider taking the time to say, what do you need? What can I take off of your plate right now? And me being able to say, this is what I need. Even though this is the
Wow.
policy, this is what I need. And so that, set the tone for the entire 45-day stay where Eleanor, her twin, could come every single day with me and spend all day with me and my husband in the NICU. And then my mom could swap us and my mom could sleep every single night in a chair next to Abigail's bed for the
Wow.
entire duration of her NICU hospitalization.
I'm so impressed by like only can be described as a miraculous way you were able to articulate and define what you needed and ask for it. Because sometimes that can be such a challenge, but it makes so much sense that the neonatologist would say yes, because that's best case scenario, honestly, for Abigail and for you. Like,
Mhm.
number one, we want you, Marah, to go home if you can and sleep in your own bed, even if it's just for a little bit. And the really only way you can do that is if it sounds like you knew your mom was there at the bedside too. And she
Exactly.
has this whole other lens that she can see from the like medical experience and probably come up with ideas or suggestions or like little takeaways that she could be like, hey, Marah, you could think about this, or I noticed this person said this. Like, it's just so great to have extra eyes and ears there.
Exactly. I can't emphasize that enough. I mean, having her there to always pick up on cues, right? Follow up on subtle hints, have extensive conversations with the respiratory therapist that came in about what was really encouraging or what was concerning. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it it's really, really true that, I mean, being bedside is so important. And also recognizing how fortunate we are that we were able to do it. So my husband's commander at the time, she had kids and she just, once she heard of the situation, she just said, say no more and let me know once your daughter's home. And
Wow.
he didn't have to worry about going to work for those 6 weeks. And, I had finished my doctorate and I'd finished a position that I was in over the summer and I was, you know, prepared and ready to be not working for a while. That
Yeah.
was that was the plan, and
Yeah.
we were really very uniquely in a position to be bedside.
To
Um,
be present.
and to be present. Yeah. And similarly for my mom, I mean, she had to just tell her team, listen, I'm working remotely and it is what it is. And they did it. So
Do you remember the first time you got to hold her after she was really critical? And what was that experience honestly like for you?
yeah. So um, I remember it more because one of the nurses snapped a photo. But it was very much so, it took two nurses and a respiratory therapist to put my 5-pound intubated baby on my chest for skin to skin. And it was probably within 48 hours. And Adam was in the room with me and he was holding Eleanor, Abigail's twin. And I remember she just kind of like nuzzled her head into my chest. And I just had this really overwhelming sense that, even though she was definitely in a coma and she was definitely, really like very critical and the future was very unknown, there was also like that. It felt like I knew that it would be okay. Whatever okay looked like, it would somehow be okay.
Hmm.
And I really truly felt that there was so much immediate, unflinching support from, my parents, my in laws, our friend group. My God. I mean, immediately, like the response was so supportive and so loving that even though I felt such immense pain and, knew that there was a mountain of trauma and grief to work through, I also knew like no matter what, everyone was doing what they could to ensure that we would be okay no matter what. And that's the kind of support that I wish for everyone in this situation. Anyone who has to, go through that, terrifying experience, whether that's, a traumatic event or whether that's, learning of a diagnosis or, the death of a child, whatever it is, that that you feel like even if it feels so devastating, that you can sense that there is a love and support there that will carry you through, um, no matter what happens, because the future is uncertain and uncertainty sucks and it's so painful sometimes. But it is.
It's so beautifully said, Mara, because I feel like I've even been in this position before where you're scared to reach out for fear of bothering somebody. They have so much on their plate right now. I don't want to even bother them because, oh my gosh, their child's in the hospital or they've just gone through XYZ. But what I hear you saying is reach out and maybe just don't expect a response. But the reaching out and that feeling of support does actually, it doesn't take away the situation, but it sounds like it gave you some comfort.
Yeah, immense comfort. I think, the deluge of, messages that I could sort through in quiet moments, the immediate sent. I mean, one of the things that was just immensely helpful was immediately, those closest to us who knew were sending like DoorDash gift cards. And it was so helpful because then we could, order DoorDash to the NICU or at home for my mom and Josephine, or, however we needed to navigate it. Like it wasn't necessarily, um, you know, we were completely at liberty to fuel ourselves and nourish ourselves and tap into all of the like wonderful food that Tampa Bay has to offer, while also like making sure that it fit into exactly the space that we were in and, came to the location in which we were at the time in which we, whatever. So I think it was like immediately, and even, the quick text that no need to respond. I just need you to know that I love you. Like it was so
That,
meaningful and it was really, 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 really important.
yeah. Can you walk us through what your experience was like from the NICU and kind of this phase of, and one of the things you wrote to me through here was that you had never even really paid attention or noticed a trach on a person before. And like here you are knowing exactly how to care for it and keep your child alive using it. I don't know that I feel like we could talk for hours about this, but how did you slowly find yourself moving from like the depths and shock to where you are now? And what are some of the biggest things that helped you through that transition?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, so a lot of it comes down to we grew with our daughter, right? So like we were bedside, we learned, how to do, trach cares and G-tube cares and, feeds and how to change her trach every week and how to sterilize it and, how to navigate the ventilator that she was coming home on. I mean, there was a time when I remember someone mentioning discharge and I was like, but she's on a ventilator. And they're like, yeah, you can discharge home on a ventilator. And my mind was blown. What do you mean you can discharge home on a ventilator like that? So anyway, there was like so much that was really new and really big. And, we just had to put one foot in front of the other, um, tap into the resources that we were provided. So the nurse case manager at the hospital was phenomenal, setting up home health nursing, which I also had no idea was a thing. And we had a teeny tiny little house in South Tampa, and we had this night nurse organized for us, and she happened to be in nursing school and was, you know, ready and excited to like work every single night with us
Wow.
basically. And it was just really, really, we got so lucky. And,
We need
you
to
know, we,
figure out how to clone her.
it's so true. It's so true. She's incredible. Her name's Elizabeth. And, we really learned together. I mean, it was really just through experience, through, in Tampa, we had so many resources available to us. So we had, in-home feeding and in-home speech and in-home PT and OT. And, it was just slowly but surely, person by person, building that, you know, community of support. And this was before I really I didn't know. I knew of one group, Moms of Trach Babies on Facebook. And other than that, that was it. I mean, I didn't have any, I certainly didn't have, friends with kids with disabilities, and I didn't. And so, but then, so a year later, roughly less than a year, in 2022, sorry, in July of
That's okay.
2022, we moved to Southwest Iowa. So my husband and I both grew up in Kansas, and we moved to be closer to family. So we now are 2.5 hours from, all of our parents, and siblings, and, so many supportive friends. And, you know, we've come so far in terms of, slowly but surely, for me especially, joining more and more, you know, groups for kids with G tubes or blended feeds or trachs, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, whatever it is. But then really it was when we got stationed here at Offutt Air Force Base, and suddenly, everyone had kids, and a lot of people had kids with disabilities. So we're close to a big children's hospital. And all of a sudden, I mean, I remember my husband making this observation really early into his, going to work here, where he said, not only are we not the only ones with kids, but, so and so's, has a child with Down syndrome, and, he's having open heart surgery, and, so and so, so and so's child has,
Yeah.
something genetic going on. And so all of a sudden we were in this broader community where we were not alone, even if we didn't know them yet. And then
Yeah.
we, had, it's kind of like every experience opens a door if you allow it to. So our PT in Tampa told us about the Napa intensive therapies. So we went for 3 weeks to Denver and did an intensive therapy session in the summer of 2023. And while we were there, we learned of therapists who did similar therapy really close to where we were now living. So once we got home, we started therapy through that clinic, and come to find out, a lot of the Air Force spouses' kids attended therapy in that clinic. And so
Wow.
from there, I became part of a really tight-knit group of moms, and now dear friends of mine, who have, children with various disabilities. And, one of my closest friends lost her son a year ago to his battle with epilepsy, and, has started a foundation in his honor. And so it just so many different, like, perspectives and experiences. And, um, you know, every single, like, from that PT sitting on the rug in a way too small bedroom in South Tampa, to like an incredible circle of friends in, like,
Wow.
the Omaha, Nebraska, Southwest Iowa area, just allowing every person and every opportunity to be exactly that. Because there was a time when imagining having a child who would need a wheelchair was devastating. Like,
Right.
that was horrendous.
Yeah.
And now I love accessibility aids. There's nothing cooler than accessibility aids. Like,
Yes.
I I love how they give her, freedom and independence, and I think they're incredible. And, I see how my husband and I always say that for Abigail, we wish that whatever happened never happened. But for ourselves as people, as a mom, as a dad, as, you know, colleagues, as humans, we can't imagine not having had, these experiences. And then also for our kids. I mean, Abigail has 3 sisters who are, this is their normal, and, they get to, through every interaction and play date and event, spread that inclusivity, because having a trach is normal, and having a G tube is normal, and having a suction machine is normal, and having a
Yeah.
pulse ox, can be normal. Like, these are things that we can normalize together. And, but recognizing that there was really a time that envisioning anything down the road was, you know, I'm embarrassed to say, like, catastrophic and horrible and worst case scenario. And now that we're down the road, there's so much good in those things too.
What have you learned about yourself throughout this journey?
I can truly keep pouring from an empty cup, and my husband can keep pouring from an empty cup. And that really, so we had gotten to a place where we were, we knew we had the cerebral palsy diagnosis, and we knew, obviously, like, significant global developmental delays and, all these things that we were, working, to give her the greatest chances possible in therapy. And we felt like we were really on a roll. It'd been a really good year. And then she had her first seizure, and it was very long and required a 911, lights and sirens to the children's hospital. And then this year, it has been, you know, a really trying year of, my husband being deployed twice, Abigail having, a very med resistant form of epilepsy that presents itself in really difficult to stop seizures every 6 weeks or so, and kind of like a renewed sense of vulnerability and
Yeah.
painfulness that, like, for the longest time, I thought, at least Abigail doesn't have seizures. Like, at least she doesn't have seizures. And now here we are. And Abigail too
Yeah.
has seizures. And, the future feels scary sometimes. I say all this because, there were times where it was really like there was nothing left to give. Like, my husband was gone, the kids were sick, Abigail was in the hospital because of a seizure, my mom was back here being helpful, or my mother-in-law was back here being helpful, or my father-in-law, like whoever was here being, multiple friends came to be backup for us. While I am like forced to wean my youngest from breastfeeding and be bedside through, whatever was happening,
Yeah.
and like work full time as a managing editor for a journal. Like, there was
Wow.
there's so much that was happening all at once, and just realizing, like, I thankfully I've learned to be able to say, look, I need today and tomorrow off, or, whatever.
Yeah.
I really need backup, and just asking a friend, like, can you come tonight? Can you come
Yeah.
tomorrow? Um, asking family to drop everything and come, like, just feeling really confident in being able to say what I need from those who I know, are really able and willing to show up for us and with us. And then also that at some point it all hits a breaking point, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can't do it forever. And that, you have to communicate with your spouse, and you have to figure out, okay, even if it's one thing, what's one thing that isn't going smoothly that we need to go smoothly? And what can we
Right.
do together to make that better in our life? There's
Yeah.
so much that's uncontrollable for us. So what is something that we can control, that we can do to improve our family's well-being right now? And
Yeah.
being really, really, really intentional about those changes and making those changes together. Um, and knowing, like, you're not alone, and you can do hard things, and you can also, figure out how to shift certain situations so that it all just feels a little lighter.
The visual that you're giving, like, I'm just kind of picturing like your empty cup. And right, I love that you said that, because the thing you hear all the time is you can't pour from an empty cup. But you're right. Medical parents can pour and do pour from a completely empty cup. But when you're filling that cup back up, it's not like self-care baths and going for this or that. It's asking for help. It's communicating with your spouse. Like, that is truly what fills that back up so you can continue to pour.
You're exactly right. You're
You,
exactly right.
I'm just repeating what you said, because I've never thought of it that way, but you're right. It's the visual of, you will have to pour from an empty cup. It's not always going to be full. And that probably won't stop.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we have to be really cohesive and real team players, to say, this is what I need, or this is what you need, this is what we need, this is what one of our children needs. Like, how do we, what can we do? How can we navigate? We're, we're in a really, unique situation too, in which, our kids have, like childcare, preschool, school. Abigail has day nursing now. So, I do have, I work during the day from home. My husband goes to work, every day. So there is, routine and, real kind of like consistency now that, hasn't always been that
Right.
way. And so I think, leaning into some of that has really been, people say all the time, how in the world do you work? Like, why do you work? How do you, and it's, you know, it is mine. It's what I worked so hard for, going to school for so many years. It
Yeah.
is, it keeps me in a world that is not medical, that is not,
Yeah.
in crisis, that is not like, that is predictable,
Yeah.
keeps me part of a team, keeps me thinking and, all the
Yeah.
things. And I so cherish it and it's so important. And I'm so grateful to all of the people in my life who make that happen. Like I couldn't
Yeah.
do it without in-home healthcare. I couldn't do it without,
Yeah.
TRICARE paying for the nursing. I couldn't do it without, and I also couldn't do it without the flexibility of my team that recognizes, like, sometimes Marah is, plans change.
Yeah.
and,
Yep.
and,
Yep.
they're really great about it. So bottom line is I recognize the incredible support that I have professionally and familially and in terms
Mm.
of my friends and my community and, the healthcare system. I mean, we could go on for hours, but it really is, allowing that reciprocal work to
Yeah.
do what it does. Like, treat others with compassion and love and care and flexibility and kindness and it will it can flow back,
Yeah.
and that is really what has made it okay for me. And that's not to say that there isn't still pain and grief and hardship and like the need for Prozac and all
Yeah.
things.
Yes,
um,
absolutely.
I don't have it all figured out and things are
Yeah.
very unpredictable a lot
Yeah.
of the time, but I also recognize that it's such an honor to be able to talk about it, to be able to
Yeah.
share about it. I'm working on a children's book about it, which should be out at some point at the end of 2026. And just, be a part of trying to make the world a better place because little ones like my daughter really, really depend on it.
It's absolutely. Oh, I can't wait to hear all about your children's book. One of the things you mentioned too is that you're closer now to a children's hospital. And what does it feel like to kind of have that safety net somewhat nearby? And I imagine that comes with access to more specialists and resources and all of that.
It's a great question, and I'll try to be really concise here. But so in Tampa, all of our every everyone on my daughter's team was very separate. So pulmonology was separate from the pediatrician, was separate from ENT, was separate from like the nursing company, was separate from our supply company, and I didn't know it could be any different. And when we moved here, and it was all within the Children's Hospital network, where pulmonology, ENT, like all these specialists were within this one umbrella. The supply company was also, under the same umbrella. Like it took away so much of the work that I had to do in terms of coordinating and planning and strategizing. And did I follow up on this? And did I stay on top of this? Like everything was in the same online portal.
Right.
Um, and so that was important for that reason, even though not all of our specialists are there. So we see neurology somewhere else. We also are getting second opinions at Mayo Clinic, which has been like the most incredible experience of my life.
Oh,
And I just, but truly now, especially too, with this epilepsy, it truly like we are in the right place at the right time. Like
yeah.
it is really, really, really helpful to be close to a children's hospital and all of the resources that that provides, as well as, being so close to Boys Town where we see neurology and, being able to be inpatient there when needed and to be able to like continually troubleshoot and work together and like try to get answers and try to get seizure freedom. Um,
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. I have just one final question, and it's always my favorite. But what is your favorite part of being Abigail's mom?
my favorite part of being Abigail's mom, other than her smell and her cheeks and how smoochable she is, because gosh, I can't get enough of all of my kids in that way. Um, it's how she continually gives us opportunities to celebrate small wins. Like there are so many times, like the birth of each of our kids, like that's so ingrained as like such a core memory, such a warm experience, like such a positive for us. And, there are few things quite like it. And yet with Abigail, it's having a very similar, visceral, strong emotional reaction to, a specialist at the Mayo Clinic giving us like an immense piece of information or, nugget of good news that evokes that same experience
Ah,
more frequently than I think we would otherwise get to experience it. And even though I wish for Abigail's sake we didn't have to have, more of those experiences, she truly gives my husband and I, you know, so many like incredible, um, incredible moments of like deep gratitude, true compassion, but just like wondrous like hopefulness and happiness that I can really only equate to like a birth of a child. And
yeah.
um she has made, us better in so many ways. And I think but that is one of my favorite parts of
Oh,
being her mom
wow.
is having that
What a beautiful
experience.
gift that she gives you. Well, Mara, tell us where people can learn about your children's book when it comes out or follow you online or any of that good stuff.
Yeah, so I recently, as I have felt more able to share and be a part of this medical community, have started an Instagram page. So it's In Good Complexity, a play on In Good Company. So in underscore good underscore complexity. And I welcome anyone to follow along, and certainly where I will be sharing updates and, information about the book.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been amazing getting to know you.
The work that you're doing is so important and shedding light on, the diversity of experience that medical parents have and what that has to teach others in similar situations is really like incredible. So thank you for doing this work too.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. For those of you who are joining us today, I am not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I am a child life specialist. And the suggestions and tips and resources that I talk about with parents on this podcast may be great for you and they may not be right for you. So, the most important person you can talk to about getting support is your care team, your doctor who knows your story and your child's story. So, regardless of maybe what I mention or what other families mention here, we're not licensed therapists, we're not doctors. We're having a conversation about what the parenting journey has been like. So, please keep that in mind as you listen today.